Welcome to your Daily Detroit, recorded on October 25th, 2019. I'm Sven Gustafson.
And I'm Jer Stays in a studio today with extremely questionable plumbing. Today, we're talking all about the raging inferno of controversy that has engulfed Founders Brewing Company in Detroit. We update you on the latest developments following a racial discrimination lawsuit, and then we're going to play a new game we're calling Wait a Minute. Sven and I will annotate a rare interview with one of the founders of Founders that he gave to WJR, one of Detroit's legacy AM radio stations.
That's straight up ahead. But first, Daily Detroit is a podcast by the people and for the people of this great city of ours. We exist because of you, our listeners. Your support helps us keep this project going.
Our show comes to you for free every day through the combination of technology, magic, and a lot of duct tape.
And bad plumbing.
If you like what you're hearing, consider becoming a member on Patreon. You'll find various options for monthly contributions as low as $1 per month and the thrill of being acknowledged by us on the air or free swag like stickers. Just head to patreon.com/dailydetroit and thank you.
All right, Jer, we've got to talk about the elephant in the room here in Detroit, which is Founders. This is a huge story. Everybody's talking about it right now. Big, well-known brand. Everybody loves beer, right? And there are some updates since we last hit on this story earlier in the week.
That's right. There's no way we couldn't spend some serious time on this today. The latest is that Founders is going to close its Detroit tap room until further notice in the wake of growing backlash over a federal lawsuit alleging racial discrimination by a former black employee. If you heard our Tuesday episode, then you'll recall that a leaked transcript of a legal deposition showed that a Founders general manager said he was not aware that plaintiff Tracy Evans was black, even though he acknowledged having met him before they began working together. That set off a chain reaction here in Detroit. Eastern Market Brewing Company announced it would pull out of this weekend's big beer festival at Eastern Market because of Founders' presence. And a growing number of bars and retail stores have said they're pulling Founders beer from their menus and shelves. Then Founders itself announced that they were nixing plans to appear at the Detroit Fall Beer Festival.
Next, Founders sent a message to ticket holders for the Saturday release party for its critically acclaimed and limited edition CBS barrel-aged stout, saying that the launch party was canceled at its Detroit location only and refunds would be issued. Founders says it made the decision, quote, in light of the recent events and, more importantly, out of concern of our employees' safety, end quote. The company issued a statement on the Founders website in which it announced the closure of the tap room in Detroit. It said it would continue to pay all of its Detroit employees, including those who've said they plan to protest outside during the closure.
It's interesting to note that the director of diversity and inclusion Founders hired in response to this lawsuit resigned Friday. Gracie Harkema, in a resignation letter shared to social media, said in part, quote, the prioritization of diversity and inclusion begins at the top. We are not experiencing a staff issue. We are experiencing a leadership issue. Inclusion is ensuring we have a seat and a voice at the table. Your actions have explicitly shown you are more interested in the optics of my face than the impact of my voice. So it piqued our interest when we heard that David Engbers, one of the co-founders of Founders, granted an interview to a Detroit media outlet.
That's right. Engbers went on the Paul W. Smith radio show on WJR AM this morning to tell his side of the story. Now, I know a lot of our listeners are scratching their heads and saying, who right now? Paul W. Smith, I mean, look, first of all, going to WJR is sort of like, that's like from the classic old school Detroit handbook, right? I mean, this is like a legacy. I mean, I said it's a legacy AM radio station, and it really is. And this is where, like, you know, the kind of old guard of Detroit has always gone to tell their side of the stories when they get in trouble, right?
Yeah, today it's Paul W. Smith. He took over from J.P. McCarthy. This is an institution in Detroit that goes back decades.
Yeah, and so legacy station, today they're basically a very kind of right-of-center radio station. They syndicate a lot of talk show hosts like Rush Limbaugh and Michael Savage. So some serious right-wing kind of politics there, obviously. to Paul W. Smith's credit, he does, he has historically gotten a lot of interviews with the UAW leadership, which is that's a hard get for anyone who works in media in this town. So kudos for that. But my point being that this is not exactly Founders' core demographic here in Detroit of sort of young urban beer enthusiasts. I mean, it makes a curious choice of venue, especially considering the topic that, they're being accused of fostering a racist work environment.
I mean, WJR's core demographic is mostly
old white men.
Yeah, old white men.
Yeah, exactly. And doctors' offices.
So we're going to listen to parts of this interview, which ran for about 10 minutes in its entirety. And in a hat tip to Love It or Leave It, we're going to play a new little game for Daily Detroit, and we're calling it Wait a Minute.
All right, here we go from the top.
This next story, I don't even want to talk about, but I will because it's a big story. But I don't know what's going on with this. First of all,
strong intro, Paul.
I'm not a big beer drinker. I don't follow these beers. Craft beers are big.
Wait a minute. I just want to point out that, he's making my point about a, kind of a channel mismatch there, like venue mismatch for their core demographic.
Yeah, if he doesn't.
It's fine he doesn't drink beer, I guess, but he doesn't even sound like he wants to do the story.
It doesn't matter to me so much, but there's some kind of something going on that has just exploded.
Some kind of something.
It appears to be a social media explosion. Here's what I do.
I just want to say I can basically hear him squirming in his chair. Like this is like nails to the chalkboard stuff. Like he does not want to be here doing this interview.
Well, I'll just tell Paul that I'd like to face tweet his Instabook.
Let's skip ahead to the start of Engbers talking.
It's very confusing to me. So we'll get a little insight from one side of the story from Dave Engbers. He is a co-founder of Founders Brewing. And Dave, you got to feel like you've been hit pretty hard, blindsided with this story, it seems to me.
Blindsided is an appropriate thing because we're talking about somebody being blind and apparently not knowing if somebody was white or black.
Colorblind, you might even say.
But Paul, you nailed it right there. I mean, Founders, this isn't our first year in this industry. We've been doing this for 22 years, and frankly, our first 10 years were a constant struggle, not knowing whether or not we were going to be in business.
Wait a minute. All right. Back in the day, I worked in a newsroom, and we had a term for this when somebody just gave like overly long answers that go way back in time beyond which was necessary, and it was first the earth cooled. He's given us a first the earth cooled answer. I've heard this story about Founders' beginnings. It's interesting, but it has nothing to do with the matter at hand here.
Week by week. We struggled, but kind of in the Midwest fashion, we pulled ourselves up from the bootstraps and...
Wait a minute. Bootstraps. Anytime anyone says bootstraps, take a drink.
Drinking game. I mean, this needs a violin soundtrack.
Worked hard, and we started building a brand, and we really, got a great following with the beer enthusiast community, which it sounds like you're not a part of yet, but we always say continue to introduce somebody to craft beer, and it will change their life. But this...
well, maybe I better start drinking craft beer.
Yeah, well, you should, because it's a phenomenal thing. And
Wait a minute. Just from personal experience, I would say for both of us, do not drink beer just before you go on air, Paul W., because you get the hiccups.
Yeah, I used to do that on the old happy hour, and it really gave me gas that I had to burp. Essentially, didn't mix well with being on a microphone.
This phenomenal industry right now, and we're in the middle of a controversy, and frankly, we need to talk about it because unfortunately, in today's day and age, a lot of people are reading headlines, but they're not reading the story. And
wait a minute. I think we did literally read the story.
We did literally read the story.
We literally read the deposition as well.
Not reading the facts. So as we've grown our business over the years, we've gone from 12 years ago we had 16 employees.
Wait a minute. Okay, so
first the earth cooled again.
We're now more than 3 minutes into this, and we have no direct.
They still haven't
addressed
the
what's
elephant
going
in the
on.
room.
Yep,
over 600 employees, and we've grown this thing, and we're learning a lot on the fly. But this whole incident here that's come out, and as you mentioned about the deposition, I think you nailed it. You know, unfortunately, one of our folks was deposed, and he was being cautious. He, you know, as you said, you don't answer anything unless you absolutely know the answer, and you know, and it doesn't print well. And
Wait a minute. It doesn't print well. That sounds like statements when I hear stuff like that.
It probably doesn't sound well either.
No, it doesn't sound well either. It doesn't address the problem. And that, like, the thing is, it's so far, and we're now 3 minutes, 43 seconds in. It's about you.
Yeah.
This is still about you. There's been no addressing that, like, the greater problem. This is still about you.
Yeah.
We first and foremost want to thank all the people who've come to our support and, you know, who know our brand, because our brand is built on authenticity, and, you know, sometimes we call it the principle.
Wait a minute. So if it's built on authenticity and you have not addressed this issue and then the other issues before this, right? Because let's not forget there was that whole LGBT flare up, because people are not upset over just this issue. Right. It's that there has been a pattern of things that don't look good. So if your brand's about authenticity, is this how you authentically act?
The Founders. And that includes diversity and inclusion, family, community, humility, positivity, and we've grown this thing to be, you know, it was a rocket ship, and we're so proud.
Wait a minute, we're about humility, and then we're talking about how we've grown this thing as a rocket ship. Yeah, rocket ship.
I mean, he at least started to mention diversity and inclusion and stuff, and I'm
inclusion and diversity has been
you have my
marked
attention now. All of a
4
sudden,
minutes, 10 seconds.
To be a part of it, and so proud of our 600 plus employees. That,
Dave Engbers, let me ask you a very simple question.
Sure.
And I mean no disrespect. I just don't know the answer. I'm not an attorney. You're not supposed to ask a question unless you know the answer. But I'm not an attorney, and I don't know the answer. 600 employees, 22 years for Founders.
Yeah.
How many other racial discrimination suits have you had against Founders in your 22 years?
0.
Wait a minute.
First of all, I'd just like to say kudos to Paul W. for finally asking a tough question, direct.
Yeah, but I mean, that question felt like so soft it was written by a PR person. Like, obviously there was no disrespect. I feel like he knew the question was coming.
Well, of course he would know.
Interesting.
We have
0.
I mean, we were...
Nice Fox News trick there where you reinforce the talking point,
0.
the person you agree with, right? 0.
You know, I always thought we were like the poster child of diversity and inclusion.
Wait a minute. What? You're now going... So we are now, just to give people context, we're now 5 minutes in, and you're literally saying that you thought of yourself as the poster child of diversity and inclusion.
Which everybody listening, I don't know how people are supposed to make that conclusion. And it's not even it's not the point here. You're still not addressing the core allegations here. Keep rolling. We'll come back to this.
The entire essence of our company was built on accepting everyone from who they are. And I always say, you know, beer is the conduit that brings people from different backgrounds together, and it crosses all these different barriers. And, you know, beer is a celebration of life. It's a social beverage and brings people together. And that's what really got us into this industry. And that's why this has really been so devastating.
Well, and I presume you want to sell beer to anyone and everyone you can sell beer to. So it wouldn't make a lot of sense to, point at a certain group or groups and say, well, we don't like them, so we're not going to try to sell them beer. I mean, that's not how you've grown.
Wait a minute. This isn't the allegation here. The allegation is not that they didn't serve somebody.
Yeah, he asked an even more direct question. Let's speed it up to that one.
Is it true that Tracy Evans, the former Founders Brewing worker who's filed this racial discrimination lawsuit, has said under oath that Mr. Ryan, Dominic Ryan, the guy who did the deposition that's getting all the gas here, that Mr. Evans has testified under oath that Mr. Ryan is not racist and was his friend?
Yeah,
Is that true?
It's very true, and I'm sitting at my desk right now, and I've got a picture of Tracy and myself and my partner Mike at a celebration with huge smiles on our faces. Yeah, that's why this is really difficult. And Tracy was a part of the Founders family for years, and that's why this is so hard. This is very, it's personal, and it's something that we will get through because our brand is strong, and we've had, really a lot of support from other breweries, wholesalers, retail partners, the beer enthusiast community. I mean, it's been quite humbling.
All right, wait a minute. I'd just like to point out that this actually raises a good point, which is, and I think it's important to point it out, that none of us know what exactly happened here, right? We don't even know the veracity of Tracy Evans's claim as
the direct claim
as made in this federal lawsuit.
Inside of the lawsuit.
None of us were there. We can't pretend to know it. But I think
this is missing the forest through the trees.
Exactly. I think that's almost secondary in a way right now to what's happening, which is the fact that they've lost control completely of the narrative. And I'll come back to that a little more later.
I'll mention that we're now 7 minutes in.
Final question. But final question. Yeah. Why was he fired then?
Oh, I mean, as a brewery, we had an opportunity. We saw an opportunity to open up a second tap room in Detroit because we're based here in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
First year it's cooled.
And as we saw Detroit was struggling, we saw an opportunity and a need for us to go down there. We wanted to be a part of the rebirth and regrowth of such a phenomenal historical city.
Wait a minute. I've heard this press release. I've seen this press release 200 times in the last year. Rebirth, take a shot.
We wanted to be a part of it. We wanted to invest in the community. And that was really what we wanted to do and be a part of it. So we went down there and that's what we did. We wanted to watch and be, physically be there and help the city of Detroit rebuild.
Wait a minute. He's not answering.
He's not answering the question. We are now 8 minutes in.
Dave, I don't know you. We're meeting for the first time. I mean, I don't think I know you. I'm trying to get an answer here. Was Tracy Evans given a promotion into a position that you didn't feel he was handling well? I mean, what changed? You keep saying you wanted to open the room, the tap room, and all that, which is fabulous.
Yeah.
But what is the?
Yeah, the room never got opened.
And he was supposed to have opened it. He was supposed to have opened that room, and he never got it open.
Correct. And we, as a company, our job is to help him and to coach him, and we tried to give him all those opportunities. And unfortunately, it just didn't happen. So it was based on performance.
Okay. That's what I was trying to find out, my friend.
I think that's good.
This is cringeworthy.
Well, look, I'm glad that Founders is finally talking, saying something, right? Other than, just sort of perfunctory, legalese responses, to very narrow issues. But clearly they still have a lot of work to do. And like I said, I think that the veracity of the lawsuit at this point is almost kind of secondary. It's taken a step back from the larger picture, which is that now Founders is facing this crisis because there is a perception that there may be a racially hostile, racist atmosphere, at least in their Detroit tap room. Now, whether or not that's true, and I mean, I think I have my own opinions about it, but that's all it is. The fact is that nature abhors a vacuum, right? And they have gone silent for days on this. And that has allowed...
Which is similar to what they did with that LGBTQ tweet about the whole thing
last
with the chamber.
Year, when the Grand Rapids Chamber endorsed the former Republican Attorney General Bill Schuette for governor. It took them 9 days to clarify it. Whoop, that was sent by an employee who wasn't authorized, and we're not leaving the chamber. They're not good at this. So apparently they've realized that they've got to talk. That's good. That's good. But you have suffered a lot of damage in the intervening period because you didn't talk about this, and you're still kind of not really.
No, they're not talking about it.
Yeah.
There isn't. This should have been a lot shorter, and they just said, look, there are things that we need to work on, regardless of the particulars of this lawsuit. Like, there isn't any direct addressing of the issue. The leaked deposition talked about that they didn't see, like, if they don't see if he's black or white or whatever. He didn't know a DNA test. What this does is reinforce to people that you still don't see people of color.
Yeah.
That's the problem here. You're not seeing that there could be an issue.
Right.
And you know what? It fundamentally, at the end of the day, like, it comes down to black people aren't seen historically. Like, the whole point of slavery was that they weren't people. They didn't have rights to vote. So when you don't see black people, that's got deep roots that clearly this guy does not understand.
Right. And if you believe that if you're founders and you believe that the lawsuit is without merit and that you do not have a racially hostile work environment, then come out and state it unequivocally. You know, like, you don't even have to talk about the lawsuit. I understand that, like, you know, parties in lawsuits often don't want to talk about it for legal reasons. That makes sense. That's fine. I don't think you even need to worry about that in this case. But come out and say 4 sentences. Just say, Founders believe strongly in the concepts of inclusion and respect and, you know, racial equity. We do not stand for, you know, the use of the N-word or, you know, any discrimination in our practices. We apologize to our audience if people have been offended. We hope to make things right. And couple that with some, like, community outreach efforts, because I think there's a lot of perception out there, right or wrong, that Founders came in and, you know, look, I give them a lot of credit for opening, you know, they're right down there in the lower.
It's a tough neighborhood to make things go in.
For sure. The lower caste corridor right there behind the Masonic Temple, you know, it's starting to slowly fill in now, but it's still kind of a, you know, no man's land in some ways. So I give them credit for that, but they're coming into Detroit. It's a lot different than Grand Rapids. And I think there's a perception out there that they didn't quite necessarily, you know, appreciate or do their homework about what they were getting into and what it's like here in Detroit. It's different than Grand Rapids. Before we let you out the door, the UAW strike against General Motors appears to be coming to an end after 40 days. The strike had cost the company $450 million per week, according to the Center for Automotive Research. Full-time workers will get an $11,000 ratification bonus and temporary workers $4,600. Industry publication Automotive News was keeping a running tally of voting from the various UAW locals. That tally showed the proposal passed with 56% support among production workers and by a 2-to-1 margin among skilled trade employees. The deal still needs some more voting, but it's mathematically assured of passing at this point.
Second, related to the strike, we got some feedback from listener Doug following a recent segment. It's about the future of these Detroit automakers and the billions of profits specifically at General Motors. And I'm going to do my best to summarize because he kind of adds some context to something that you were talking about.
Clearly a pretty financially savvy guy, Doug.
Right. And to give people context, specifically, it was the idea that GM's making billions of profits, the workers should get more share, things like that. Doug says that it's not fair to point to a big number, in this case, GM's $8 billion profit last year, or CEO Mary Barra's $22 million salary, without context and compare it to what one worker earns. Doug says that if you look deeper, GM is only earning 3.5% on its assets, and that's not much better than a savings account in a bank, and that's when things are doing well. Add to that the costs of transition to an automated, connected, electric, and shared vehicle business model, and that's going to be really expensive. Long story short, without more investment, GM isn't going to be able to make the changeover. And to get more outside investment, they need a better rate of return for investors. And if there aren't investors, there isn't a changeover, we're going to get more Lordstowns or plant closures. And although that's not factory line workers' fault, without the company doing well, we all could be in for a much rougher ride.
Thanks for the comment, Doug. If you'd like to submit a comment about anything you hear on our show, or you just want to say hi, shoot us an email, dailydetroit@gmail.com. And that'll do it for today's episode, friends. It's the weekend, so as usual, we like to give out some thanks to Cheyenne Nocerini. Thanks, Cheyenne, for the crack audio editing you always do and for filling in on yesterday's episode. Randy Walker, the tech enthusiast who wanted to join my professional network on LinkedIn. Thanks to you as well. And to the plumber who should be showing up here hopefully today.
Listen, I don't want to do a wet podcast in the middle of fall. It's just not going to work. But most of all, thanks to you for listening. Until next time, I'm Chair Stays.
And I'm Sven Gustafson.
Take care of each other, and we'll see you around Detroit.